recording. Begin.
Yeah, we're live.
Yeah, sorry I'm late, guys.
Traffic.
You're forgiven on traffic. I thought I'd be 10 minutes late and then Amsterdam just
I can't
squeaking
see
around.
you.
Shall we make the circle small?
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah,
it would be better because this part's going to be lost.
I think I know it's
Perfect.
So, welcome everybody at our 47th think tank meetup. Yeah, 47th. For which this time we'll have a certainly experiment with Marcel acting as a guest speaker and also introducing today's discussion topic. So I think most of you have been here at least once before, but in case not everybody knows each other, we're going to start off again with a round of introductions, which is also interesting for the people that follow everything from the World Wide Web.
I'm going to check in a bit.
Yeah, if everything's okay, we should have like at least 2 or 3 people following this discussion online as well. So,
200 or 300.
Well, yeah, it's going to get there.
million, but
Potential watchers.
you never know. At least we get these cool car commercials, so that's nice. So, if we'll start some introductions and we'll work our way to the person. Okay.
Well, I'm Roald. I'm a 4th-year student at SKU in Hilversum, working on sound design, sonic design, software design for music. That's it.
Right, my name is Thijs. I'm a sound artist, also studying at KMT. Focusing in my work mostly on installation work and live electronic music. And yeah, one of the more active members of the Soundlinks collective, which is also responsible for hosting these thinking meetups.
Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm also a 4th-year student on the SKU, and I study sound design there. And like Thijs, I also do a lot of live electronics, I do a bit of composing, and I still play guitar a lot in different kind of setups. And yeah, working at 4th year, yeah, I compose for theater and dance sometimes, right? So that's what I do. And you?
Well, my name is Glenn, and I'm not a 4th but a 3rd-year sound design student at the HAKU. And I mainly do live electronics and composition of electronic music. That's not.
I'm Pinar. I'm a sound designer as well. Graduated from HAKU this year. Daytime have a actual sound design hardcore job, and my other life is installation art and sound art, etc. And I work a lot with Thijs. I'm also the founder member of the Soundlinks, which I'm sort of extending thanks to Thijs and Mark and all of the people who are not here yet, but they will be later on. So that's about it.
I'm Yaniv, I studied theater and sonology in The Hague. I do live electronics within groups, and I work a lot with theater and dance.
I'm Mariah. I'm also doing interactive sound art kind of things. Sometimes involving writing or media as well. Also working with style as hardware engineer and generally freelancing.
Might also
Stuff
be
like
good.
that.
Might also be good to thank Stein here as well for
Yeah.
allowing us to use this.
Yeah, I also am known in the supervisor community, I don't know why. Yeah, dus dat is het.
Okay. I'm Mark. I also graduated from HKU. I'm now lecturing the first and second year students for the first time. I'm also a sound designer and do some composition and also do some software development for installations. So that's about it.
I'm Robin. I graduated the same year as Mark, and I'm working as a freelance sound designer, composer, and performing musician in bands. That's about it.
I'm Gary. I'm studying composition and electronic music in the same year as Thijs here. I'm a fourth year student also, and I mainly focus on collaborating with musicians and creating live electronics for those musicians. And I collaborate a lot with choreographers, filmmakers. That's it.
Okay. I'm Marieke van der Ven and I also studied at HKU, same year as Mark and And I work as a sound designer and composer and make electroacoustic music. And at the moment I'm working with a choreographer to create some music for contemporary dance.
Which choreographer?
We did for the film. Rutina Dance Company.
Which dance?
Rutina Dance Company in Amsterdam.
My name is Stan Verbergt. I'm also a fourth year student, just like the rest of you. Mostly. And I am a composer, and I develop technology to expand the abilities of my expression abilities of my music. And I work a lot with film, theater, dance. That's about it.
I'm a second year Master of Music student at the HKU, Music Technology Department. And I'm more of a composer, but also electroacoustic, like you, with minimal elements, but not in an electronic way. That's about it.
I used to teach most of you. My name's Marcel, for the one of you I think who doesn't know.
And the 3 million.
And the 3 million. It's 3 million now.
Yeah, it's right, pretty fast.
After the round of introductions.
Yeah. Just call them So, I am a composer. I used to be a teacher, as I said. I am working very intensively with dance the last little while, with choreographer Anouk van Dijk, who just a couple of months ago emigrated to Australia. So day after tomorrow I'm going to Australia to work with Anouk. It's nice, but it's really far away. Like a 30-hour flight. And I guess the other part of the introduction I should give is my motivation for being here. Maybe somewhere deep down inside I really miss teaching. And that was the reason, in fact,
Cool,
why
what have you been missing?
Don't tell Rens.
Well, probably.
And as a matter of fact, a couple of days ago I started preparing for this, and about after half an hour or something like that, I realized it felt like I was preparing for a class. So what I did was I shut my laptop and went for a walk and changed some diapers and then started preparing again, and then I thought, okay, I have to keep this open. It's a round table discussion. All I want to do is to be the instigator of it. My reasons for wanting to do this are twofold. First is the blurb that Thijs put on the website. Did everybody read that? Okay. Not everyone. Okay, well I'll go through it again just to clarify it maybe a little bit. The second is because I think this Soundlings initiative is a really interesting one because it's it's so much focused on talking and discussing and thinking about things. At least that's my interpretation of it from what I read on the website and what you guys told me about it. And it's, in my experience doing this kind of work now for not even that long really, 12, 13 years, is that so much of the discussion that goes on gets focused around, okay, but did you use the cycle object connected to whatever? Which, in the beginning when I started out with this kind of work, was a really interesting discussion to have, was a really good discussion to have, because the technology was still developing. I remember David Ziccarelli coming to McGill in Montreal to show Max, or to show MSP, sorry, Max had already been around for a while, but to show MSP. And he started it up, and the first thing it did was crash. And that got me really excited, because I remember looking at it and thinking, this is really going to change the way that we think about electronic music, because the way I had learned how to do electronic music was you know, two kind of paths that you chose. You went into Sound Designer and Pro Tools and did kind of, you know, pseudo tape editing with software, and the other option was you worked in Max or something like that, and all your synthesis was done on outboard gear. And there were the more obscure options, obscure at that time for me and for kind of my circle, though obviously not obscure for the people who were working on these kind of software products. But C-Sound, for instance, was the other option, which for someone wanting to study electronic music was not really that interesting of an option if you wanted to really study composing music, if you wanted really to learn composing music, because C-Sound was so focused on programming, whereas, you know, with Max, right from the beginning of Max, you could work with it kind of in an improvised fashion. And that was the thing that really appealed to me for composing music. So that aside, that whole discussion, I think we've kind of hit some kind of plateau now in that discussion. And I think what Kurt Rolske said is a really interesting point. He said the 20th century was about figuring out how to make electronic music, and the next century will be about how to perform it. I think he was only kind of half on the mark with that statement, because I think the other half, that has largely been neglected, is thinking about what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it. And I know there are some really great examples of people who have really thought about what it is that they're doing. But those, in my experience as a student and as a teacher and working in electronic music, I found that those discussions were always kind of marginal, and either marginal or historic. That, you know, it was a tendency to talk about Philips and Perez and all those ideas as historical kind of facts, but less of an emphasis talking about the ideas about now that are going to influence the future of how electronic music develops. And it's just kind of exciting to me to think, you know, I was talking with Gregory Taylor just a couple of weeks ago. He was talking about Stein in the 1980s and what an exciting place it was to be. The kind of, you know, discussions and fights that they were having here about, you know, what's going to be the future, you know, why are we doing the things that we're doing. And I kind of realized that I had never had those kind of discussions, except in kind of really small circles. So I wanted to, you know, right when Pinar and Tice first told me about Soundlink, I thought, oh, there's a really great initiative. You know, once it gets rolling a little bit, I'd like to, you know, come and talk at one of the meetings. And the opportunity came way sooner than I expected, because oh, wait a minute, that was the first reason that I wanted to talk. The second reason that I wanted to talk, no wait, this was the first reason. The first reason was about that paragraph that I wrote, the blurb that I wrote about the new piece that I'm working on, and about these kind of questions that come up to the surface that you kind of think about and you realize that they're really important questions to ask, but at the time that you're working on something, you don't really have time to figure out the answers to those questions. And they're not necessarily questions that need to be answered in order to be able to do the work, but they are questions which, when you chew on them for a little while, they make you realize, they force you to realize that what you're doing now is not necessarily the thing that you're always going to be doing. That things are going to evolve, and that some kind of tentative answers are going to have to arise out of those questions, which are going to influence the way things go in the future. And it had also to do with, I guess it's not the third thing, sorry I'm blabbing, but is the realization that what we're doing is still an emergent art form. Just like painting was in the High Renaissance. And of course, the art historian will say, oh, we've been painting for 10,000 years, but that's not right. Of course we have, but consider what painting was in the 19th century. It was the dominant art form, and it wasn't always the dominant art form. Painting in up to 1850, 1900 was as important to Western society's film history as now, for us now, to give some kind of comparison, right? But at the time that Da Vinci was painting the Mona Lisa, it was still an emergent art form, and in fact, Da Vinci had to fight really hard to get painting respected as an art form. And this is because in the Middle Ages, of course, painting was cheap in the sense that the materials were cheap, right? You can think of all kinds of exceptions to this about the special kind of dyes that were used in some paintings and stuff like that. But the main evidence that I have that painting was a cheap art form was there's this letter from a pope, one of the medieval popes, that says, you guys are wasting all your money commissioning artists to make paintings because we should be making gold statues, bronze statues, we should be using all these expensive materials so that we can all melt it down when we need money. So this sounds crazy to our ears, right? But think of it in terms of a pre-humanism society, okay, where artists never signed their work. Nobody knew who made them. There are a couple of notable exceptions, but in general, nobody really knew who made things because it wasn't important who made it, right? What was important was what it was worth, what you could get for it. Not in the sense that the artist was thinking what he could get for it, but what the commissioners were thinking what they were getting for it, which invariably was the church. So if we try to transplant those issues of that transition time, right, from going from medieval to Renaissance painting, I believe that we can see the transition time in electronic music going on right now, that electronic art. Sorry, I have a tendency to say electronic music because of all the faces I see around me, but I'm not teaching now, so I can say electronic art, which includes video art and the interactive stuff and all that kind of stuff that, or web art, which is kind of not, there was kind of a heyday in the early internet days of this idea of internet art, which kind of hasn't flowered as I think it had promised to. And I think commercial interests had a lot to do with that. So anyways, why don't I'm just going to, I've said I think most of what I want to say, so we can throw the table open now, and I'll kind of try to, I have a bunch of statements and questions and quotes from people that, after we chew on one subject for a little while, maybe I'll just throw up on the beamer, and then we can, just kind of give it a bit of momentum to go through things. But just for the people that didn't see it, I'll read this out loud, and you can read along with me too. There are several questions that, as a creator of electronic art, I struggle with at the onset of every new composition. Some of them are directly related to the project I am about to begin, and these are usually answered in one way or another during the process of making the piece. Others are of such a universal nature and have such far-reaching implications for the very nature of the work I do that I must necessarily leave them unanswered. Like I said before, you don't answer those questions because if you start thinking about them as an individual on your own while working on a piece, you'll never end up making the piece. So this is why I think these group discussions about these kind of questions is especially interesting. Some of these questions are, does the process of creation and presentation of electronic art necessarily imply a power relationship? Is electronic art necessarily ephemeral? Where in the hierarchy of artistic genres would the humanists of the Renaissance have placed the electronic arts? This last question puzzled me immensely during the past few months while I was working on an audiovisual composition based on the principles of the Northern Mannerist artists. I know Thijs studied art history. Does this mean anything to the Dutch people here when I say Northern Mannerist? Okay, well, that's good that I know that I'll describe that a bit more before I show my piece. Because I think it's not important to know, but it's interesting to know what it was influenced by. And since I'm talking to a group of professionals, as it were, people with understanding, I think I can do that. These artists were only secondarily concerned with technique. Their primary concern was to secure the integrity of their art by being fully aware of the cultural value and prestige of the work they were creating. The idea behind the work was the essence, the technical realization was subordinate to it. Yeah, I'll go into that later. The hierarchy of genres to which painters adhered quite strictly for more than 400 years after the Renaissance provided a foundation for them to gauge the relative importance of what they were working on. So I ask, is it desirable or even feasible for such a hierarchy to be considered in the electronic arts? What would such a hierarchy look like? What are the guiding principles that might lie behind our assessment of, quote, important electronic art? What aspects of our craft might stand in the way of our being able to look at it from this perspective? So once again, all these questions that I'm asking are from the perspective of looking at electronic art as an emergent art form. And as I said, Da Vinci and a lot of other people in his time and around him believed that painting should be the highest, most superior art form. And they had to fight and argue to make their point and to get their point across and to get their standpoint heard. And I think it's an exciting idea. Maybe it's a crazy idea, but I think it's an exciting idea if we think about what we're doing in those terms. If you, I don't know how many of you have read the Onderstroom, the Ockham book about electronic music. Has anybody, Onderstroom, right? Onderstroom. Yeah. And has anybody, probably not then, has anybody read Kees Tazelar's Complaint? Okay, I recommend, you have? Okay. It's difficult reading because the tone of it is so awful, but I like it. I'm super happy that he wrote it, and it clarifies a lot about, I think, about my point that this is an emergent art form. I was really excited when I heard that, is it Oskamp? What's her name? Jacqueline Oskamp. I was really excited when I heard that she was writing this book because I thought, oh cool, you know, this would be really good for Dutch electronic music. And I remember when I first got the book in my hand and I read through it, I thought, this doesn't feel right. And I wasn't sure what didn't feel right about it. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Don't get me wrong. It's still great that this book was published and that it was written. But equally important after you've read the book, or maybe before you've read the book, is to read The Art of by Kees Tazelar, because because it sheds light on from what perspective Oskam wrote that book.
Read what?
The Onderstroom.
No, the other one?
The other article, if you search for Kees Tazelaar, I think the article's called Zonder Stroom, which says everything. It's vicious. It's a really vicious attack on Jacqueline Oskam. And already Jacqueline Oskam and Kees Tazelaar have written letters to certain publications defending their standpoint. Those are also very, very interesting to read. So, but I mean, don't go out and read this book just because I told you to. My only point about this book is not necessarily about the book, but it's about the discussion that kind of fired up around this book last year, which is kind of demonstrating to me that we're really busy with an emergent form that still needs to get defined. I think one of the funniest things about that whole discussion is Jacqueline Oskam gives one definition of electronic music in the book, and Kees Tazelaar gives another definition in his article, which is completely 180 degrees different from Jacqueline Oskam's. And I think that tells you something about that if we're going to be active in this art, we have to be active in the discussion about the art.
Do you know the definitions?
I think I've kind of, yeah. Should we start on those kind of things?
I'm curious.
It's actually, since we were talking about book recommendations, there's
The
a lot
Hobbit.
I want to say a little bit more on the topic. There's this book that Chris Salter wrote called Entangled, which I think is one of the best references for art and technology between, from beginning of the 20th century till now, going over all different disciplines, going from architecture to sound to dance, theater.
What's you give me the name of the author again?
Chris Salter.
Chris Salter.
He's actually in town right now.
Why is he here? The name
Yeah,
of the book?
it's called Entangled.
Entangled.
And we have the book upstairs.
Okay.
But if you want to look at electronic arts in the wide sense of all these disciplines, there's at least one book that gives a good historical reference to a lot that has been done the last century.
That's good. I didn't know about this book. When was it published?
Last year or the year before. So MIT Press. Yes.
Very good.
It's only $30.
Oh.
That's really one
They
reason not to
know
get.
how poor the electronic
Yes.
But,
Marcel, I have one more question.
Yeah.
You were talking about a power relationship between.
yeah, that's one of
Yeah.
the questions I want to ask.
Oh, okay. So you're
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, I want to center on that one for just a second. Look at that. Oh, look at the dates.
If you want to pass them around and just everybody
And,
take a look at them.
And Kees Tazelaar's
It is what it is.
called this. It's in Dutch though, so
Scorpio.
Yeah, I can understand it better.
it's freely available on the web, so it's even cheaper than.
And this is pretty interesting without reading the original book as well.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Definitely. It's in fact though it's good preparation for reading that book, because if there's one thing when I didn't even read all of Onderstroom because I was kind of suspicious
Yeah.
of things that were in there. There were some really glaring omissions, I felt. And there were some inclusions that were given significance that I thought were questionable. Not wrong, because I mean, I only know about a fraction of what goes on in Dutch electronic music. For instance, there's a passage about live coding which upset me. But not as much as it upset Kees Tazelaar, or as much as it upset Kees Tazelaar. But anyways, so that's. But as I said, it's maybe a good presentation, preparation for reading the Ostkamp book. Okay, why don't we start with, somebody asked about the definitions of electronic music. By the way, I still want to consider this a circle. Okay, so please interrupt me, because you guys know, as 90% of you know that have been in my classes, I have the habit of just verbal diarrhea. So please don't let that happen today. Okay, I'll leave this somewhere.
What smells funny?
I don't know, I just wanted to kind of start with that because I thought it was kind of funny. Although Frank Zappa didn't say electronic music was dead, this was around 1970, and he said jazz is not dead, it just sounds funny. And this smells funny bit, of course, if you think about an American saying this, it's got a lot of content to it. And just as anything else that Frank Zappa said, it makes you laugh first until you realize what it is that exactly that he means by that, right? And then it makes you think. And this was when I was thinking about all these big questions, I had to think of this passage. So I won't dwell on that for too long. Okay, the Ostkamp definition is this. I'll translate for anybody who needs it. Strictly speaking, all music where electricity is applied could be called electronic music. Okay, that's already, that should send a flag up somewhere in your thoughts, right? Okay. And there are two extremes. You can categorize them in two extremes. Any music that's made with a microphone or loudspeakers, or where there's amplification, and on the other side, a score for acoustic instruments that's been generated by a computer, algorithm composition.
That's a weird polls, actually.
Yeah.
That's a very
well, hang on. This, yeah, I know. But this is. I'll get to when we look at
this case, isn't it?
No. Yeah, this is because I don't know where the passage is in the book, where because I don't have the book anymore. I borrowed it from somebody to read it. But Tazelaar cites it. Tazelaar cites this definition. Now, very important. Tazelaar does not give his own definition of electronic music in his article. Okay, and this is a very good thing about Tazelaar because he takes this definition, and then he gives the opposite pole of when I talk about two poles, right? Okay, this whole definition you can see as one pole. Okay, the other definition that Tazelaar gives is also no good, but it's I don't think Tazelaar meant to. He wasn't criticizing this definition when he put it in his article, but what he was doing was he was saying, look, definitions are problematic. Okay, so the Contactorgaan Elektronische Muziek, the society, I don't know, it's the first time I had ever heard of it, which is really weird. Anyways, it was a very important organization apparently in 1957. Do you know it, Mariah? Just judging by the tone of your laugh, I thought maybe I didn't know if you were laughing at me. Anyway, but I had never heard of it. But anyways, they came together and had this very serious meeting where they said, okay, we have to define electronic music. This is 1957, remember. Electronic music, what's that? Emerges, thank you, by the representation of artistically montage fragments of recordings that are acquired by a magnetic tape or an other kind of sound recording device. These recordings could be made of natural sounds or synthetic sounds with electronic or mechanic electronic equipment, and they could consist of combinations of
Yes, old school.
Yes, but or it could be from both sources and maybe not even modified.
It seems like they're really narrow.
Exactly. And so what are the two poles of the definition I'm talking about? The two poles that you could give for the definition of electronic music now is you could say everything's electronic music. You could say, no, this is electronic music. Right? All that live DSP, that's not electronic music because there's no tape involved. Right? Okay.
The other one is like referring to something that in itself needs to be explained.
Well, the other one doesn't even define electronic music, really, does it?
It just refers to music.
Yeah.
And then adds electricity.
Well, not even that. I mean, she seems to be giving, and I don't want to knock Jacqueline, because I am critical of the book, but I'm not critical of her. Okay, I want to make that very important distinction, because I'm very impressed by the book, because there's a lot of research that went into it. And different from Case Tazalar, there were a couple of lines that angered me, but not because I thought they were wrong, but because they went against what I felt was right. Okay, the thing about live coding, the way live coding was described, I think it's like 2 sentences or something like that. And I remember reading that and thinking, you've never gone to a live coding performance, have you? If you had, you would have maybe understood.
What did he say about it?
She said it was, oh God, can I remember I don't think it's in the index of the book Live Coding.
Well, it's only 2 lines.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Probably somewhere.
That could be. Yeah.
She read the
I
book
think
already.
I think it was something like it's elitist and doesn't really go anywhere.
Elitist.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you guys all know about my flavor of live coding, right? That is really the exception.
Well,
What I do.
he doesn't.
What is your flavor?
Oh, you've probably never been to one of my live coding things. I set it up like
I've never been.
you need it, but you know about it though, right?
So it is elitist, like you're all wearing suits?
No. It's the most anti-elitist thing you could
I
possibly
mean, in
think
general,
of.
live coding concerts are incredible. I mean, it's like squatters almost, you know, this kind of.
Yeah, but what she means by elitist is intellectually elitist. Okay, which I understand your point, and exactly I do. I agree with you completely. It's very inclusive. Topolap is like Occupy Wall Street in that sense, right? But what she meant, I think, was intellectually elitist. And I think maybe she had heard about my performances, and that's why she said that. I don't know. I'm just guessing right now. But 2 million people. But this is the other reason why I wanted to do this talk, because the things I would say in front of the class in Hilversum as a teacher, somebody could complain about them, and I'd get a talking to. The things I say here, nobody gives a shit, right? Yeah, but who are you going to complain to? Yourself.
So you lied to us.
But no, sorry, I got a bit off track with that. But oh yeah, let's explain. What I do is I set it up as a competition. There's an audience of people who don't know about live coding, generally don't know about live coding. I introduce what it is that the two contestants are going to do. I set it up kind of like a game show. One person gets exactly 3 minutes to live code something interesting, and then the other one gets exactly 3 minutes to live code something interesting, and then the audience votes with applause who did a better job with live coding. And then that person goes on to the next round. I haven't done one of these in a long time, but I understand that other people have taken over this format with live coding. Now, I have to admit, it wasn't completely original of me, because the first live coding performance I had ever seen was the guy who made Chuck. What's his name now again? Gay Wong, thank you. And Mr. Super Collider guy. Nick Collins.
How does that mean now the right?
Yeah, Nick Collins versus Gay Wang. But what they did is they also set it up as a boxing match, but they were live coding at the same time. And
It's really hard with boxing gloves.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of funny. Gregory Taylor introduced it like a 1950s boxing match. And he came up and he said, "I'm in this corner," and stuff like that. And they made a big, kind of joke out of it. And I remember the live coding started, and I went, "Oh, this is kind of boring." It was boring because it went on for 20 minutes, and after about the first 20 seconds, you didn't know who was doing what. And I think this might have been a little bit elitist, because at one point, Gay Wang started rewriting the kernel of Chuck in live. And I got a lot of flack on the live coding list because I wrote an article that I tried to submit to ICMC. Nick Collins was one of the referees of the article that I wrote, and I wrote about Nick Collins and how people were booing him. So my article didn't get published. But it's true, people were booing him. And why were they booing him? Because instead of live coding, he was loading in patches that he had previously made, right? And this was one of the fundamental points of my live coding thing. It's not about Super Collider, Max, Chuck. It's not about the technology. It's not about making the coolest sound. It's about the person that's standing there on stage, and about the audience wanting to see him sweat, right? That's something that why do we go to live performances, right? You want to see something that is happening at that moment, right? And that was, sorry?
Effort.
Effort, yeah. You know, one of the Lucio Pavarotti's biggest performances ever, in front of like 200,000 people, was fake. He wasn't singing. Only the orchestra knew. The orchestra were sitting there playing the bows a centimeter off the strings. Because Pavarotti couldn't hit those high notes anymore, so he faked it to a recording that he had made a piece years before. So, it's kind of cool. In some ways, they didn't get caught, right? That's kind of interesting. But on the other hand, it makes you question. One of these points that the Renaissance artists were talking about, that they said was decorum. Does everybody know what the word decorum means to us now? Decorum means doing what's appropriate in the circumstances that you're in. So if you're going to meet the Queen, you don't burp, right? Silly thing. But the original concept of decorum goes back to the Greeks, but it's basically the same thing. What we're making, the art we're making, is super important. So you don't draw cow shit in your pasture scene of cows in the pasture, right? Because that's not done, right? Cow shit is not part of. And it sounds silly to us now, right? Because we're 500-600 years detached from these kind of ideas. Actually, not even that far, right? Probably maybe 100 years detached from these kind of ideas of decorum. But, you know, so it was really, you know, there was one Dutch painter that painted made a painting of a cow or 2 cows in the pasture, and the painting is 3 meters wide. Now that was outrageous for somebody to do at that time, because to make a 3-meter wide painting cost a lot of money in the 17th century. So with those kind of resources, you don't paint a cow, right? We paint the Nachtwacht, right? We paint something important, right? So I'm presenting all of these kind of things because I want these kind of things to inspire the way we think about what it is that
Well, not a very long time ago, there's this artist guy, I don't know his name anymore, but he also does the voice of Ernie. Yeah, and he made like a floor of Pindakaas.
I heard about that.
Yeah, there was also again like all this money we give and blah blah the arts, and he makes a floor of peanut butter. So it still exists, really.
No, of course it still exists, but even further than that, that is the concept of 20th century art.
Yeah.
What is the urinal, right? Right? We put something on a pedestal, no matter how stupid, banal it is, we put it on a pedestal. Hey, it's art.
Yeah.
Right? That is what started everything, right? That's like, well, don't get me started on postmodernism, because I'll bust a tube somewhere.
But there is something I'd like to say.
Yes, please do.
In my development of electronic music, I'm struggling with the performance part of it, the effort part, just what we're talking about. That's something that I come across very, very often next time. And I wonder how people think of it, because when I like to compose, but I always notice that I need to make some effort out of it. I like to design instruments to compose with, but if the instrument just goes and does everything and that's it, there is no instrument for me.
Yeah.
That's really something that really set me thinking.
Is it that,
yeah.
Is there not effort in making your own tools?
Yeah, there is, but it's not complete for me.
What sort of effort are you talking about? I mean, if the effort of making your tools is not enough, and you say it's not complete, what is the part that's not?
What would make you feel complete in that sense?
Are you talking about real, like, sweat, that kind of effort?
Like muscle
Think of the intellectual effort that went into writing some of Bach's music. You know, some of his really obscure, not very well-known music. If you analyze it, there's an incredible intellectual effort that went into it, and I think that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys remember Max lesson number 1 in the first year. I showed that Bach generator patch.
Yeah.
And I think this is the thing that he's talking about. That
yeah.
we know all the rules about how Bach generated, which was an immense effort for him to develop those rules. And now you plug them into a Max patch, which is freely available on internet. You press go and it generates hours.
You put a lot of effort into building the Max patch, right? So
No,
But this is also about.
but this is also an issue.
with somebody else,
Right?
right?
Yeah, but
Somebody.
what then you come to the question about we talked about earlier. What does this mean? What is it worth? If it just is there. If you go to a concert, if you go to the Concertgebouw, there are 50 people training very hard and playing and sweaty, and that's some completely different experience for me than just listening.
It feels like you were talking about the painting and how cheap the material was, that it was so hard to put value in the painting itself based on the currency being the material itself. Now that it feels like technology is so cheap, so easy to find, it's everywhere, it doesn't have any value, and sort of we're returning back or trying sort of I don't know, that's my urge. Maybe
Now
that's the
going
same.
back, going
For
forward.
the
I think.
actual physical, maybe that's becoming the actual currency, if that
Yeah.
sets the value for a piece or
I-
artwork or whatever.
I think that the artistic thinking of the maker, the creator, should is far more important, of course, and I think we should really figure it out. I think it gets figured out at this moment, but I think this is the important thing about electronic art, maybe.
I saw this performance at the Garians festival where this person, August Meyer, he wrote this tape piece. It's being played on 4 speakers. Then when he was on, he had this table set up where his laptop and his sound card, and he had this stool, which he probably just got right before the thing started because the actual sitting place was higher than the table. So it was like, he had a spotlight on him, he was like towering above the table, and he essentially hit play.
Yeah, that goes against the spirit of tape music, eh?
Yeah, but it was so strange to see him sit there, probably watching his file.
Yeah, because he was also watching the
Yeah, he
computer
was
all the
watching-
time.
He was watching
And he
the
wasn't
screen.
mixing or anything. So it was just
And it was such a strange
Yeah.
thing to see. Like,
But do you guys remember me talking about the veil of loudspeakers idea?
Yes.
Pierre Schaeffer, right? He said, my music, and he was very intelligent about this. This was something that he researched and that he really thought about. When Plato was giving classes at the academy, philosophy lessons, I think it was Plato or Pythagoras, one of the two, he would hang a sheet up and he would stand behind the sheet because he said, don't look at me, listen to what I say. And Pierre Schaeffer said that's exactly how we should be enjoying tape music. Don't.
Pythagoras, by the way.
Wasn't Pythagoras? Yeah, thanks. But yeah, and so to hear about something like this, it's like, okay, somebody doesn't know their history. Which I hate saying things that criticize people, and Augustus' music is really good. He writes really good compositions. But you're describing a big problem of electronic music.
it's like in the presentation, and it automatically becomes part of the piece. Him sitting there watching the screen becomes part of, becomes a performance, even though it's not performing. And that's the sort of,
I cringe whenever I see that. It's horrible for me to watch that.
Oh yeah, I know, me too.
it's kind of
And you can't enjoy the music anymore then.
No,
Okay.
it's an unwanted performance.
and
What's that?
An unwanted performance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Somebody scratches their ear and they're like, oh, that's
Yeah, but
Yeah.
all the time you're thinking like, what does he, what's he trying to say? Is he kind of statement or?
Yeah, yeah. And that's the big declaration of Top Lab, right? Show us your screens, right?
Yeah.
We want to see what you're doing.
It's kind of like, in that regard, the whole concert was quite interesting. There was one other tape piece where there was a spotlight on this little thing with a laptop,
Yeah.
and he went away.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
that was also interesting, and
That's
we were actually performing, but we had veils in front of us. So we were like hidden behind.
yeah.
So we got all different tastes.
I was wondering if someone just sits there and does nothing behind his laptop, that feels awkward. But if you write electronic music, which is not meant to be performed live or can be performed live, sitting in a dark zaal with a couple of loudspeakers is also strange.
Yeah, but there's an idea behind it.
There's like a curatorial crisis, it seems like.
Yeah.
in this sort of
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. I mean, we're kind of stuck in this concert hall way of thinking
Yeah.
about curation, where really this Schaefer comment is really interesting in that regard, because if you remove the thing to look at, suddenly this chair placement doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And this sort of situation where you listen doesn't make any sense. I mean, what sort of curatorial setup can you have that encourages listening? I think that's an interesting question to ask.
Yeah.
Maybe it's pillows on the ground, maybe it's a dance hall. I mean, maybe that encourages listening, and maybe that's why dance music works so well. I mean, this is like
Perhaps it's headphones that nowadays. Because I
No,
think,
but why would you, if even with headphones, why wouldn't you just listen at home?
Yeah, that's my point. We're so used to listening at home right now.
Yeah.
But, sorry, could you go on?
I would have rather heard Augustus' piece at home
Yeah.
late at night than in that room with those
Yeah.
people and watching him sitting there.
Yeah.
No offense if you're watching.
But yeah, no, but I agree with you wholeheartedly. I didn't see the piece, but I know his music well, so I think I have a pretty good idea of what kind of piece it was. But the other thing is, of course, just to follow up on that, it used to be that nobody had really good stereo equipment at home to listen to electronic music, and went to a concert of it because you'd hear it, the way it was supposed to be heard. But that's not really the case anymore, especially not with you guys. But the other thing I wanted to say, which is maybe further kind of develops this point to the next level, is you guys are of a generation, I can say this because I'm older than I think everybody here, significantly. You guys are of a generation that does not value the cost of music. You guys grew up in a time where MP3s cheapened music to the absolute 0 point, right? Now, I remember being 15 years old, going to the record store and spending every penny I had that month for one LP, okay? And I remember a couple of years later getting a decent tape deck and recording songs off the radio, because there was stuff that I just couldn't afford to buy that I really wanted to listen to, okay? I'm not that old, okay? So just think of the immense change that has happened. And that should tell you something. Like, you say as if it's nothing, you say, oh, I would rather have listened to this piece at home, throw it on a USB stick, go home and listen to it.
Well, I mean, I mean, how many people have like 4 speakers or 8 speakers?
Yeah,
That's not the problem, I think. I mean,
Yeah, of course.
you can get 4 speakers if you want. It's more I think we have to think about the underlying concept or something behind it, because, or else you can go on forever when everyone has 4 speakers but not 8, and everyone
but it's also like the being in a community experience.
Yes.
I mean, you're not sitting there alone in a theater hall listening to that music.
Yeah.
But you have a bunch of people, and afterwards you're talking about it. Like, hey,
Well, I went to a concert of OK Pomerud in Montreal once, and it was one of these Rien à Voir concerts, so quite literally the veil of loudspeaker concerts where OK Pomerud was diffusing his piece over, I think they had 32 channel diffusion system. It was massive. And right after his piece, you went into the lobby and you sat in a circle like this with the 50 or so, or maybe even less, maybe 30 people that were there, and you talked with OK about his piece. Did that happen at Augusto's performance? That should
No, but there were more these
Right?
morning discussions where everything got actually discussed, like the Alliance Musical.
Yeah, Gabriel's is pretty good for
They
that.
actually had these round talks like, each morning, in which the works of the day before were being highlighted.
Yeah, that's great. It's so important to have those things.
So there was actually that kind of thing not immediately after, but maybe it's even better to first digest.
Well, I don't know. I think that's debatable. I would think it's better to be right after.
Yeah, and most of the time it isn't. Most of the time it's the next morning.
I mean, I hate it. Did you guys see the project they did with Yorit last year with Electro Ensemble? Any of you? There was no button. I shouldn't be saying this on a live internet.
You want me to stop it?
Just in case you were watching. No, but it's not bad because I think the music was good, the performances were really good, but we had so much to tear down after the performance, after each performance, that I simply did not have time to go talk to people. And I wanted desperately to go right after the show and talk to people, have a glass of wine, and say, so what did you think? But we couldn't, because if we didn't start tearing down the equipment right away, there just wasn't enough time to tackle the equipment. So that is, actually that's kind of irrelevant.
It's not a problem for electronic music. All the equipment you have to.
Well, and this is the second part of the whole idea of the valuation of music. I will go on the record on internet to an audience of, what is it, 7 billion? And I'll say, and you guys can hold me to this laptop is going to be my very last Apple laptop ever. I have decided I'm going to use this until it just stops working. And I'm not going to buy any more Apple products ever again.
That's a big one.
Yeah, that's a big, and I'm
Since I've
making
known
this
you,
public
which
for the first time.
how have you always had Apple?
Well, I used Apple stuff back in the time when
Yeah.
Apple wasn't cool. Right? You know, I mean, I've been using Apple since 1978.
So why this drastic change?
Well, what's Apple doing now?
Now they're moving like
Reason
professional, like focusing on professionals, moving towards.
It's a more profound shift than that.
They're kind of like pushing people in a direction, and you can't go and you can't see what's under the hood anymore, and they want you to.
And their focus is more for personal use and less for semi.
Yeah.
People that are using it personally feel like professional, but professional.
Of course, Apple has always been a little bit of that,
Yeah.
but now the shift is becoming more profound. That the computing device that Apple is making, I won't say computer anymore, but computing device is a consuming tool and no longer a producing tool. And the Apple OS is slowly drifting towards iOS. Pretty soon they're going to merge, and pretty soon we're all going to be consumers, and none of us are going to be producers anymore.
It really feels right now, if you have an idea and want to do something, if you go to Apple, it feels like, oh, well, there's an app for that. Just download it and do it. Instead of allowing yourself to investigate something and to try something out yourself, to try it in a different fashion.
Yeah.
So it just really feels like, okay, just download something and you can play around with it.
But for
And
me,
you're bored and you can't
it's also again a kind of challenge to because now I have an iPad. And we know but I have this app like it's a remake of the Borg MS-20, and I mean it is really restricted in one way, but for me it's also like a new experience to try to get everything out.
This view that I'm explaining is it needs nuance, and you're totally right. I'm sketching it like it's this big black and white thing. Of course it's not. It's not really at all. But sometimes if you want to really go for something, you have to think of it in those terms, I think, in your mind. But it is, I mean, because it's the same thing that happened when Steve Jobs left in Apple, 99, 90, 91, I can't remember. Or left, he got fired from Apple. And then Bill Gates owned Apple. But the same thing happened when Steve Jobs left. The people that replaced him, the first thing they tried to do was they tried to open it up. And then when that failed, they locked it right down again. So I don't know. I mean, now that Steve Jobs is gone, I don't know if this has anything to do with him leaving or it's a silly discussion. The point I'm trying to make, the second point of me never buying Apple stuff anymore is the other day I looked at my Apple graveyard and I realized that's like I don't know, 20,000 euros worth of gear in the course of 15 years. So, and things that you buy for 5,000 euros, which now are literally worthless, and the materials that went into building those things have destroyed some African countries, right? And Apple a little while ago said that they were going to no longer take part in the environment protection scheme that they set up. But they backpedaled on that.
Okay.
But just the fact that somebody at Apple said, this environment thing that we dreamed up 20 years ago, fuck it. Right? Somebody said that. That's like the guy in the PVDA who said weathermen should get fined if they predict the weather poorly. That's stupidity. It's saying something like that. Sorry, I'm taking over things.
What else would you run? How else would you
I'll see when this one dies. I'm looking at the Raspberry Pi thing. That's
Everything nowadays.
Well, I saw a live coding performance on a Raspberry Pi which blew me away with the OpenGL stuff that he could do. And I thought, okay. So,
but isn't it nowadays that since technology is always also getting cheaper and cheaper, I mean, right now my phone can probably do about as much computing as with the pioneers of computer music we're working with.
way more. But
isn't it like, or shouldn't it be going more to what you actually do with it? Besides what the investment is.
Thank you for bringing the discussion back to the original point that I wanted to make. Yeah, because what was the famous?
That what you actually.
Well, that's yeah, exactly. But so often it's not, right? And this is another one of the passages in Onderstroom that upset me a little bit when I read it. I'm not going to say who said this, but it was in an interview, and somebody said. The cost of computing is going down and down, and it's just going to keep going that way, and now we can do so much more, and we're always going to be able to do more and more. And I thought that's just not right. That's not what electronic music should be about. It's inevitably, it seems to be what we always talk about, but it's kind of an unsatisfying thing to talk about, I mean, I've been to a couple of these ICMC discussions, informal things in restaurants and stuff, and they're like, oh, the next video card that we'll be working on can process 90 million polygons per whatever, it's spitting out these kind of things. Thank you. And I'm like, okay, well, the reason it's becoming more and more powerful is because people want to play video games. Not because we can make any kind of better art. And the point I was going to reply to Thijs about.
Well, actually, there's one thing. Last year, I've been working on this piece, and Polito, which is inspired on Xerax's Politos, which he built like in the late 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
During one of the prototyping sessions in Montreal, we had Robert Dupuy come in and have a look at what we were doing.
Cool.
And he worked on the programming back in the late 60s.
Yeah.
And we asked him like, okay, well, how did you guys work on this? Basically, they were just driving around Paris with tapes, like push-cut tapes with the program, then going up to some computer late at night that was then free for them to use. Then they put in the program, they went drinking, and then by daybreak they would have some results. But one thing that they never had the opportunity to actually see, like the output of what they had created until
real-time computing.
Until like the final piece. So they never had the time to actually look at what is going on. So a lot more was conceptualizing, like, well, it should do something like that. Whereas while we were working on the piece, I was basically live coding, directing these lights and making interactions between things. So in that sense, new technologies can give you like faster technologies. They can give you that extra loop of reflection and actually trying things out.
Yeah. Good point. Very good point.
By that's also like exploring the artistic possibilities in much faster.
Yeah, but there's also this thing that some ideas are just impossible without certain technologies. For instance,
if the idea is to use this technology.
What was it? Electronic sheet?
Electric sheet.
Yeah, electric sheet. That idea is not really feasible without the framework for it to be there. And it can still yield really interesting
Okay.
art.
Well, what came first?
Yeah, but
Yeah, the action.
yeah, the technology or the, I mean,
Does it matter?
no, no, that's a good point, and I think Electric Sheep was a brilliant project at the time. In hindsight, I look at the output and I think, okay, it's a screensaver. Yeah, but you're right, as far as conceptual art goes, yeah, very good point. That was an extremely interesting use of network computing.
This
at
is
a time that
that's
was
an
not
interesting
really
point,
going.
and you say it starts with the conceptual art, and it also ties into creative effort. If each increasingly evolved piece of technology kind of devoids the effort of what was done previously, is conceptual art the only recourse? Because I see that a lot in increasingly in electronic art, that it's becoming more and more conceptual and less about crafting a good piece of music or making a beautiful visualization.
But
Well,
one page,
there's different
that was one time
reasons
ago.
to make
Yeah.
this, right? I sometimes will criticize or reflect on certain technology, or the social context of the technology, or whatever, and sometimes you just want to use technology to create a certain experience.
But I feel like the using technology to create an experience side of things is losing its luster in a way.
Funnily enough, I have the question, is creating an experience enough to call it art? That was the email question.
Creating an experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it just enough?
I mean, you disagree, or what do you think?
No, I mean, for me, that's definitely what it is. I mean, I see technology more as a means to create certain experiences and trying to reflect that. I mean, some people, I mean, there's some.
I think what
What I feel like right now, especially in electronic music, and sort of live electronic music, is that I only want to work with systems where I don't know where I'm going to end when I start a piece, because then there's a necessity for me to be there. And if I know where it's going to end, then I shouldn't be involved in
That's
being
exactly
there.
the point that I made. You feel the necessity for you to be.
Yeah, I have to have a reason to be present there at that moment. If that reason isn't there, then it's a different kind of work. It might be more like an art installation or more like a tape piece or.
Yeah, but I think first of all that you have to make sure you don't forget that you being present and performing pieces, or well, it adds part to the experience.
Yeah,
so if you are designing experiences, then you should really think about this.
Yeah,
Or you should choose not to be there.
Yeah, or choose not to be there.
Yeah, but what I really like about all this technology is that, and especially on HKU, I don't want to make any, but is that we use like new technologies to amaze people, so it looks like magic, for a lot of people, and that's what I like. And we do need this technology to like still amaze people, because people see all this stuff on TV and a lot of things are already happening. But we can do, we can break apart a Wii controller and do very cool things with it. People would like be amazed, like, wow, what is he doing? And that's really.
And that's
I'd like to object to this.
Yeah.
I don't like that way of looking at technology. I don't want to.
Yeah.
Don't take it personally, but there's something that this wow factor, and the problem that I have with it is that it's so short-lived.
Yeah, but that's actually what I wanted to say. First of all, what was it? Oh yeah. First of all, if you are doing live music or music which is being performed in a concert hall or a concert setting or whatever, it's not just about the music, it's also about the theatrical element, which is really important.
Yeah.
So, besides that, I wanted to say that exactly like you said, I think that electronic music, especially if it's really conceptual, it can be a demonstration of technology, but it shouldn't be focused on it. I think think that's better kept for, I don't know, university presentations or stuff like
But
that.
that's where the theatrical part comes in.
Yeah,
That's what
and
I like.
but that's not only where the theatrical part comes in, it's also where the composition or the design of the experience part comes in. Because I think all this talk about new emerging technology and everyone can be a composer and whatever, that's not really true, because it still takes years of practice to know when should this get louder, when should it be contrasted with a silent sound, or
Well, there was,
you know.
there was one thing I had a heated discussion with my brother about once. George Lucas was giving some interview and he said, you guys, this was actually a while ago already, George Lucas said, everybody listening to this interview has access to 10 times the computing power I had when I made Star Wars. Why aren't you all making Star Wars? And my brother said that to me. He said, you know, why did you make this conceptual crap? Why aren't you, you know, you've got the technology right there for a couple €100 to do what George Lucas did. And I said, what was the manpower that George Lucas had when he worked on Star Wars? It has nothing to do with the technology he had. It was about the manpower and the bundling creative energies of lots of people, living, breathing people, bags of water, right? Bags of mostly water, right? Revealing my age. You know, so I mean, the technology isn't what enabled George Lucas to make Star Wars. Technology was a fraction of what enabled him to make Star Wars. I mean, I don't even like the Star Wars films, but I mean, the point is, it took, you know, the sweat and the creative energy of a huge team of people, right? So it's just wrong to say that technology is, it's just wrong to look at technology from that perspective, I find. That technology is some kind of thing that's going to make us all create brilliant things. Because I don't believe that's true.
No. But I think we will agree on that.
Yeah, but it's an important thing to say, I think, because it's something like George Lucas, when he said that, I mean, he probably realized what he was saying, but I think 99% of the, you know, the GarageBand iMovie people that were watching that were thinking, oh, I'm going to go buy an Apple now and make
that's the same problem.
Right, it's the YouTube syndrome.
Yeah, or problems like X Factor or whatever, it's the same problem.
But it's, yeah, I mean, anyone can buy things and some brushes.
Brushes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not the same about that. For example, you'll have, I can imagine you have something which can create something in the course of a genre or something. You still the devil is in the details.
Yeah, but yeah, if you mention something like that, it's not about the actual patching. Yeah, everybody can with some learn how to make such patch, but the entire intellectual framework that's behind that, the creative force that forces you to make decisions about what the output should be and what you should do to get the output that you want, to make the machine to like act the way you want it to act and not follow the machine. That's where the interesting thing was.
Do I have permission? Oh, sorry.
Well, that's the sort of thing, like, I mean, I think basically anyone can have like some wild idea, but it seems to me that it's artists that actually take that idea and do it, and actually take the time to.
But you also learn how to generate new ideas and keep it.
But especially the determination to actually make it and like while working on this, developing the crafts to actually do it. That's like the main difference.
And taking it seriously.
Yeah.
John Cage was interviewed, and the interviewer asked him, you know, what's this 4-minute, 33-second bullshit? Anybody could have written that. And John Cage, with a total straight face, said, yeah, but nobody did. Right? So that's the brilliance of John Cage, right? It's not about creating ideas, but finding ideas.
Yeah, but that was actually
explicit about
the entire concept behind that also.
Yeah, but it's Yeah, it's not a piece of music though, for the guy doing the interview, right? It was, and you're absolutely right, I mean, it's I think one of the masterpieces of the 20th century. But did it take a lot of sweat and blood and effort?
Rehearsal.
An intellectual effort, but it was rehearsal. It wasn't, yeah, rehearsal.
Well,
But
it took years of musical dedication and thinking about music.
Exactly.
Before you got there.
Exactly. It took a lot of paying attention to what was going on.
Yeah,
A lot
that
of
was-
thinking about what was going on. Exactly. And this, sort of getting back to the original point.
But how should I get to the public? That's,
No,
well,
the process.
yeah.
Process of applying that piece, the reasons in the process are
Yeah.
really important, and how do you perform those, so to speak.
Yeah, but of course, afterwards there's been a lot of writing about this. So I
Of course,
think in this case, this showing of the effort is done by other
Writing
people
about that.
writing and talking about it.
But
Yeah, I don't think it's
not only.
I just want to bring it into here because I don't. Yeah, okay, good. Because not necessarily thinking on an intellectual level about it, but somehow that piece engaged people. People who are not academics or not necessarily involved, but you hated it or you loved it. Nobody could be indifferent to it, right?
Yeah.
That's the strength of that piece. You can't be indifferent to it. And I think there's, it's too easy to make things that people can be indifferent to. And at the same time, it's really too easy to be provocative as well. So it's a catch-22, right? If we're thinking in those terms, which is the brilliance of John Cage, was he was never really provocative. I don't think 433 is really provocative work at all. I think maybe some people felt it was that way, but I don't think it is at all. And John Cage, especially if you listen to him talk, he was not a provocative person. He was saying, you know, I mean, how much more gentlemanly can you be than John Cage and his group?
Well, the water piece he did, where there's a recording of the water sound. Yeah, water. Yeah, that piece, wasn't that quite provocative for the audience
No, I
sitting at
think-
that talk show?
But he was as funny about it as anybody in the audience would think it. He was laughing about the same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So he wasn't like saying, okay, this is serious music and you shouldn't laugh. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that's the other thing about John Cage.
He was completely like, oh, you find it funny? Well, it is quite funny. He was good with smiling, doing it.
These pieces are quite meta, right? They're quite, I mean, 433, it's quite meta in that sense. It's about something which is...
Yes, but, and this is great that you say this. I don't know if you mean it in the same way that I think you mean it, but I hope you mean it in the way. Because it's a small piece about a big subject.
Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of a big piece about a small subject, right? Those are easy to make, right? I can whip up a max patch for you right now that'll generate 5 million hours of additive synthesis.
And it's about love.
You can say it's about anything, right?
Yeah, but I'm a man.
But to have it really about something is something else.
Yeah. But yeah. I think this piece is really a big exception, though.
I don't think it is. 433, I think it's a... No, I think...
Because now you're saying like all art should be like that, something like that, which is...
No, I don't think I'm saying that at all. I'm saying, to go back to my original introduction, there should be a hierarchy. We should be thinking of... and I realize this is a really dangerous thing to be saying, but we as makers should be thinking of, okay, how important is the thing that I'm making right now? How much effort should I be putting into this? Because that thought, that feeling, was what turned painting from a marginal art to the dominant art for 400 years. Right?
Thinking about this subject, I was sort of reminded of one of the sessions we had with Koreans, where this Japanese composer, you might know his name, Yeah.
Who? Sorry?
Hikari Koyuha is a Japanese composer.
He
He gets selected over and over again.
Oh, yeah?
He has this very personal style. Everything is fortissimo. Everything is
Oh,
best
I know what
best
you're
style.
talking about.
Everything
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
as fast as possible as.
But
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I know. Yeah.
And he had worked for a year. He composed a piece like
Mhm.
a whole year to compose it. And one of the critique points, the jury of the Hane was there as well. And one of the critique points was, okay, so you've been composing for a year to come up with this cello part that no human can play. Which brings like a lot of these questions into being like, okay, so spending a year long working on something that is that can never actually be realized on the instrument that it is made
Intended
for.
to be.
It's it takes that whole thing of like taking your art seriously and ways of thinking about that. Like I was just completely at a loss. I like, okay, but how?
It wasn't conceptual work either, right?
No, it's just all these
It was
that
really intended to be
Yeah,
very.
it was really.
And there's these questions like, what is important? Because what do you want to get out of it? And is it the speed? Yeah, it has to be the right speed.
And it has to be articulated.
Yeah, and it has to be articulated, and it had to be played like rhythm.
Yeah, so the funny
Did
thing
somebody
is,
perform it or not?
Yeah.
yes, I saw it, and it was an amazing performance. Because you
Yeah.
see this
So
string
much
quarter,
pain.
they're struggling and they're all this energy.
But was that the
coming from it.
intended thing? Like,
No,
who
no,
the performer in a situation
right.
is
There was a
so.
big language barrier I understood from Thijs. So
Yeah, there was. Yeah,
Also,
but he clearly indicated that he wanted the piece performed as written.
yes, and he wasn't glad with the performance.
Okay, then it was still interesting.
He
to
was
see.
saying, well, you know, the string quarter, they are known for being very well musicians for contemporary music. And he said, no.
But
And then,
you know,
never met her, you don't know, they're excellent. No, they were not fast enough.
But it's quite interesting that he got nominated
Yeah.
It is quite interesting that guy got nominated.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't get
No, no,
nominated.
but he
Well,
won,
at least he was programmed at one of the biggest festivals for.
With a great string quartet like that. I was looking for an image that I had. It was a piece written in the 70s, which is a joke piece. It's impossible to play, which made me think of this. But it's got all these things in the piece. Quadruple fortissimo, but as quietly as possible. It's just this provocative thing. But of course, it's not a new idea, right? Frank Zappa's Black Page. And in fact, this was the thing that Steve Vai always said about working with Frank Zappa, is that he would ask you to do impossible things until finally you literally couldn't do it anymore, and then he'd be happy. Right?
No, but that is his intent.
Yeah, I know, but that was Frank Zappa's intent too.
No, but that's Frank Zappa's intent. But I was really wondering about the intent of this composer.
Yeah.
Well, you couldn't get it out because
No,
the
you couldn't
language
get it,
barrier,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Okay.
But I think I know.
Side of this, because haven't we seen this before? Like composers think of new stuff and nobody could play it, and eventually everybody could play it.
Yeah.
100 years later or whatever. So maybe in 10 years,
Yeah.
the cello player will be able, maybe with technology,
Yeah.
to be able to
You're
do
right.
it.
But why Martha? I mean, like, you just said, like, no, I hope it's not. I was just immediately thinking of all the enhancement, like actual bodily enhancement. Why do you have that immediate cringe?
There was, I
It's
did
an
bring it,
interesting
there was
thing,
a,
I
yeah,
think.
the studio where I work, somebody had dumped a whole bunch of old books at the entrance. They were moving out and they wanted to get rid of stuff. And I was going through the books and I found an old psychology book from the 1970s. It was 78, 79. But it is interesting. I was flipping through it and there was a picture of two chimpanzees and they had electrodes embedded in their brain. And the experiment was, and it was a successful experiment, was they gave jolts of electricity at certain parts of the brain and were able to influence the hierarchy in the social interaction. That if one chimpanzee would get a certain jolt, he would become the submissive one, and he would get a different jolt and instantly become the dominant one. Now, okay, there are two levels which this is awful. Okay, first of all, those poor chimps, right? That's the obvious thing to hate about this. But what's the other obvious thing to hate about this?
Poor humans.
Well, why are they doing these experiments? What is a perfect example of electrodes being used to control human behavior? And I bet that more than half of you are using this. Facebook. Facebook is exactly that device, right? Because what was Mark Zuckerberg? Was he a computer science student? No, he was a psychology major. He got his degree in psychology. Okay? He knows about all these experiments. And chimpanzees are remarkably similar to humans, especially in terms of social interaction. Okay? So you've got some guy in an office in California pushing buttons, determining the hierarchy between. Yeah, the only way to make a point is by making it absurdly extreme. But
yeah, well, the South Park is an episode of this.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, really. Well, it really gets. Well, yeah, it's about all this. I think.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, but to get back to
Yeah,
what I
sorry.
was talking about
Well,
but in the sense that you can, I mean,
Move your
obviously,
fingers less.
okay, you can think like, okay, army is going to use this for war, etc. You can say like this is going to be, mind control, etc. You can go really conspiracy theory, or actual maybe it has base, yeah. But there, on the other hand, there's also medical use of this, athletes with the broken legs can run pretty well.
All places. It's going to go to the
Yeah, it's gonna go, of course, but for
Everyday
people,
life.
of course, but from people to people, one of the topic gets more interest, they focus a bit too much
Yeah.
on one thing. So I'm just laying it out that it has positive sides and it really enhances the quality of it in certain ways, and it endangers in other ways. But there is going to be, obviously already it's happening, it's not new, serious struggle. How are we going to deal with this? How are we going to go through this transition? Because it's happening. It's not new that technology becoming embedded or becoming more and more of our lives, just getting smaller, getting less visible, and then becoming bigger, more powerful, whatever, etc. I mean, you can just look at your phone from there. But what I'm trying to say is this: just if I take a bit more positive side, because for some reason today I feel a bit positive. Normally I'm very paranoid, but let's say the medical side, like the athletes having no legs and using those running things, and they have their own, they again be able to do their physical effort, but supported by technology, enabled by technology, what they are at best at. Now, why wouldn't this be applied to other creative efforts like music or art or I mean, maybe even conceptual in essence.
It's
getting
done.
crazy.
There are some artists that have
Yeah, there is a style. I mean,
there's
what I meant was.
But yeah, I get your point.
Why?
I'm going to say something that I don't mean, that is going to be really provocative.
Oh, just like.
Okay. How many cases of those people with lost limbs that get new ones were their limbs lost because of technology in the first place?
Okay.
That's a very provocative thing, and I don't mean that as a very heartless, insensitive thing to say, but whenever you open up a National Geographic or some popular science magazine that talks about artificial limbs, it's always about soldiers.
Yeah, obviously those things that start from that. I mean, like internet.
That's not true.
What?
But
yeah.
the underlying technology was developed by the U.S. military, but the underlying technology is not the internet. The internet conceptually was conceived at CERN, which is a decidedly non-military institution.
And it's just used to communicate between the scientists, right? Because they.
Well, the internet was developed because the U.S. military wanted to have a communication system where if one part of it would fall out in a nuclear attack or something like that, the rest of the system could still communicate. So that's the fundamental, that's the internet, right? Yeah, the fundamental communication protocol of the internet. But what the internet is, what you and I use, was not developed at all by the U.S. Army. It was developed, really the conceptual basis,
Right.
not the technological basis, the conceptual basis was really non-military.
Sorry to interrupt, but just to sort of slightly trying to link it to the question of you asking how important what I'm doing, how much effort I have to put in, and defining what effort is and how it is actually put out. Whether, I mean, technology being part of it, I just cannot deny technology not being part of my creative process or my effort at all, at any point. And even in the language is sort of technology that we developed. I mean, how can you design that? So now, when you be so inclusive about what technology or whatever that is, I don't really like what we are basically. If you start from that point of view, it's something that is not always that we are aware or actively aware and act on. And what I'm trying to say is like, I think this question eventually brings us to maybe it's like the ethics of it. I was talking about like technology becoming so variable, so fast forward, etc. And there's this gap, there's this transition which we have to go through, we are going through, but it's so fast and we're not so fastly adapting to it, etc. I think the need that comes, the need to define some sort of ethics, the way you use it, the way you approach it emerges, because then you can answer these questions: how much effort I'm putting, what part of the effort is included in what is the technological side, where is the human part, or is there no difference anymore? I mean, I think these things are linked to each other.
But it's also that I think electronic art is one of the best venues to look critically at technology that's there, and not only critically in the sense that I have this project and I want to get this working, which technology should I use, but also like, okay, so what is technology moving towards? Is that something we want? And to maybe use technology in ways that sort of like shows darker sides of technology and give critique to it, or maybe offer solutions like, hey, we can take this technology, use it in a completely different way.
Well, it's about, in that sense, it's about taking some kind of active part in forming the future. That's basically what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's also what I meant by using these new devices to amaze people, actually, in a way.
You're back to the
because in that sense also people can see what, or how am I going to say this, is that maybe we first do stuff with a Wii controller or whatever, and later on it becomes like the normal technology for a lot of people like that.
I kind of disagree with that, because then you're really focusing on the kind of shock of the new. And I think like that's one thing I'm really missing in current generation of artists, being like really blunt about it. But for example, I'm working a lot with a Space Echo tape delay, and I always use it just for sound purposes. And then I saw this artwork with a guy that found the Space Echo and took the
cover up.
Yeah, and then you can see the tape folding. It's really beautiful. It's kind of fractal cluster of tape, and you put a light on it and a mirror beneath the tape, and you could see it on like folding on the wall. And I thought like, oh, yeah. So and I thought like, oh, I just it's kind of looking at a really old machine and just approaching the technology from totally other perspectives than what it's built for.
Yeah, this is a very John Cage idea, right? About finding beauty somewhere that you might not have expected it.
Yeah.
And then exposing that beauty for other people.
Yeah, I think also one of the most important things, because of course it looked really nice, but what I really liked about his work is that he wasn't so much focused on the current way or the latest technological developments, but he just kind of really looked at something that happened and like, hey, what's still there, or is there even maybe more to get?
Yeah. But, and also, I'm usually looking at like, what do I want to say, not like what tool is there to use.
Yeah.
What tool is there to say something?
Yeah, although educated in this technological kind of framework. I find it difficult myself. It's one of the answers I always ask myself when I start a new project. I think, okay, I gotta start up the apple again.
But
And
I think this is something you have to learn yourself.
Yeah.
You have to develop yourself.
In that
It's
sense,
not
it's
something you can.
Yeah.
People can help you with it, of course, but you have to learn it yourself.
No, but the thing I'm so interested in is the piece Robert just talked about. Is this something he just stumbled into? Like he opened it up and he thought, oh, that's beautiful, like a John Cage way of looking at it. I need more people to see this because that for me that also doesn't do it. That's not really a good reason.
No, well, I knew Sportswagen,
What's
and
the John Cage?
then you could see he did the same thing 10 years ago, but then, like, to come to this simple form where the idea is communicated so clearly, it took him like 10 years.
Yeah, you show it Sportswagen.
But those
but this
reasons,
is-
I mean, does it have to be like universal? I mean, everybody has their own reason as part of the whole.
Yeah, that's true.
For me, this reason is a very good one actually, because there are a lot of people that don't actually see what their world around them looks like.
But then it's about educating your audience.
Maybe.
Is that so bad?
No, it's not bad, but
I like that.
You don't do it really like directly, oh, I'm going to educate you now.
No,
That's what
but
I found, you
it's-
don't have the.
yeah,
But
you
it sounds
see
like
it.
the majority of this piece was about the experience of seeing
Yeah.
this beautiful thing, not about the fact that it was a tape.
Yeah, it's
Just
like
like-
Yeah, of course,
still
yeah.
for a moment, like, okay, so what have we done? And look at this device, which is almost 20 years old, and let's see how it
Yeah.
works. You know, almost like how the human body works. I mean, humans always, they don't have like special abilities except for the thing that they think. So they have to build stuff for them. So like, you know, an eagle is got like really good eyes, so he can hunt or anything, you know, and we only have our heads. So it's really beautiful to just stand still for a moment and look at what did we create and how does it work.
Telescopes.
Yeah.
no, I'm talking about more. I'm interested in the reasons why you would create such a thing. So this is one reason, because that's what I want. That's why I have created a whole lot of autonomous work, because that's what I struggle with. Is what is a reason for me to come up with something? I stumble into stuff like every day, but then I think like, is this really what I should be, putting out there, or is this interesting, or that?
I don't
let the world
yeah,
around
that's
you
what-
influence
yeah,
you.
exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry.
If you
You
have some
have to
sort
let
of
the world
hierarchy,
around you influence you. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah, no,
I'm going to be moderating.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, this sounds like it ties right back into Marcel's idea of this, like, creating a hierarchy of what's valuable and what's profane, even if that's a good word to use. I mean, I think about like the cow shit versus painting the school of Athens or something like that. I mean, when you're thinking about the things that you would want to create autonomously, I mean, are there things that you think this has value? And this is something, this is a waste of time? Or is it like,
These are personal.
everything is a waste of time? I mean,
Yeah, they're personal, and that's why I have a problem with that, putting them out there, because, why wouldn't I keep it for myself if they're personal?
Right, so I mean, what you're kind of hoping for, it seems like it's something with an absolute measurement to go to like validate what you're working on.
Yeah, so that's kind of like a hierarchy.
And getting back on your point of, maybe it's personal, but if somebody else watches your personal stuff or anything, I think the good thing about that is that these people have the feeling that somebody understands them, because they see somebody else their problems and they think, oh, I got that problem too. I'm not alone.
Yeah. This is all made by art, of course. But
Yeah.
But it's like I almost have like the
for me, it
exact.
doesn't work. It doesn't work.
I have almost like the exact opposite thing where I have music that I'm not even that proud of or happy with or whatever, and I still put it out there because it feels like such a waste for having that on my hard drive. Like, why? If somebody else likes it, fine.
Yeah, but besides that, if you find some beauty somewhere, I think that not everything needs a deep reason for like, yeah, this is symbolic for the vastness of the universe and
Oh, yeah.
whatever. But if you if you open
It's a nice thing.
But for me, it's like a paradox. Like, I don't really care about a lot of reasons. I'm not indifferent about them, or I don't know what you call that. And on the other side, I really want a reason for myself to create that and to put it out there. So
well, but if you see something like an opened up space echo, why don't you figure out your own reasons for why you like it? Or well, if you like something, just think for yourself why this appeals to you. Or not.
Is
or
it
not.
like you don't, I mean, this is maybe not even the right person, but is it like, because you're a creative person, you feel the urge to create something, right? Okay. But for me, it's like, it just became more and more articulate as the years passed. I wasn't like this like 2 years ago, probably. But it's like now, especially with Thijs, we somehow really click in terms of thinking the project. And when we have an idea, we really feel like this must be done. And oftentimes it's not the instantaneous moment that we know exactly why. But when we start thinking about it, I mean, maybe that's the thing that we have to be more actively thinking about. Like, why is this so important to us that I personally feel like I have to do this at some point. I really have to get it out. And it's not always about like, for example, for singer-songwriting part, it's really emotionally attached to me, very personal, and I feel like can I share this? That's my personal issue. But like, the other thing, it's not like that. It's maybe a bit more intention, maybe sometimes quite quirky or funny or a combination of both, but it sometimes has a maybe subtext to it, but it's not that everybody has to understand it. It's like, it's really hard to pinpoint that there's just this one reason, and that is always the reason why I do when I do something. But when I'm talking about installations, oftentimes go, hey, this art is really cool and I want to create this experience, or this would be interesting to see, and sometimes that experience holds some maybe even, I don't know, maybe some ethical questions at the back of our heads are right, but maybe not super visible. But like, the point is that when you find that thing, at least that's how it works for me. This is a question, I don't know how it works. I really feel like it has to be done, and it's really such an urge that you really go for it.
There's a difference between have to make things and having them out there, because you have no troubles with making.
That's what my question. But that's exactly what my question. I mean, do you feel like when it comes to say?
No, I'm quite good at doing the process of making is not a problem.
Okay.
But let's go back to the discussions.
No, but actually it is linked to something.
Yeah, it is linked
because
to the
it's
hierarchy, of course.
important.
Yeah.
I guess.
Also, it's like if you want it out, you can get it out. I mean, getting stuff out there these days is
easier in the history of mankind.
It's like if you put a call off, it's already captured and it's out there, we know it.
Which also devalues things.
Yeah.
A lot.
Because
Okay.
I've come to a
certain
point.
things, and it doesn't devalue other things.
Yeah, but in a way also.
Adds value to other things, maybe.
But that's maybe also why you're questioning if should I put this out there, because probably nobody would like it because there is already so much. That's also a thing I would do.
But now we're mainly these are examples of recorded music, which is which, you know, there's so much more. But and I'm not really talking about recorded music per se, but
Yeah, I was very careful that I would always talk about electronic art, because I see everything that we do with electronics as falling under, you know, one kind of broad category, especially because I do installation art, video pieces. You know, it's not, in fact, it's by far not always music that I do, and I like to not separate music composition, electronic music composition, from the video work I do, because I find that they're the same thing. I'm using the same half of my brain, maybe, or something.
But it's, I'm kind of wondering if you already group like electronic arts into one group, why is the electricity so important that it's still?
Well, and this goes back to one of my first questions about the power relationship. Which I think somebody said they wondered what I meant by that.
Glad.
Yes, it was me.
Yeah.
Okay.
it's, okay, I don't want to get too out there, but does anybody here know about Hegel's discourse on the master-slave relationship? It's a myth about the relationships between masters and slaves, that in essence they become addicted to each other. Yeah, it's kind of, it doesn't start that way, right? Because the master thinks he's somehow superior to the slave. And as the relationship goes on, it gets confused because the master all of a sudden can't clean his own toilet anymore. Right? It's a stupid example, but that's, I mean, you should all just look it up on Wikipedia. It's really a profound philosophical thing. And what's really profound about it is to compare it to Aristotle's discourse on friendship, which is, I mean, Hegel knew Aristotle extremely well, and then you think, oh, wait a minute, he's talking about friendship. But that's the whole other point. A couple of weeks ago, I got a letter in the mail saying they're going to be cutting off the electricity in my neighborhood for a while. And I didn't think of it, I threw it in the paper bin, I don't know, whatever. And this morning, while I was trying to get my kids ready, the lights went off. I had totally forgotten about this letter. And for about an hour and a half, I simply couldn't do anything. And it reminds one of the power relationship that's involved with the use of particular technologies. Somebody has an on-off switch. President of the United States has an on-off switch for the internet, which is a weird thing to think about. The Occupy Wall Street protesters in New York used, I think it was called Zakuri Park, or something, or Zucchero Park, or something like that. Anyways, there's this public space close to Wall Street, and it was a businessman, I think in the 1930s, he wanted to build some skyscrapers, and the city of New York said, no, there's too many skyscrapers, we need some parks. If you build a park that's always open to the public, you can build your skyscrapers. So he built a park. The park is owned by a corporation. So the corporation owns the land, but they own the land on the condition that people are allowed to be there 24 hours a day. They're just not allowed to sleep there. But this was one of the main headquarters for the Occupy Wall Street movement. Right? It was one of their locations. They knew about this, but what was the difficulty of this? They weren't on public land. They were allowed to be there because of this kind of tenuous agreement between a corporation and the city of New York. The corporation in spirit wanted them to get the fuck off the land, but they couldn't do that because they had agreement with the city of New York that they wouldn't kick anybody off because it was supposed to. So it was about this, kind of, I don't like to use the term squat movement, but because that's not what Occupy is, of course, but it was basically a microcosm of the internet, okay? We can all make our protest art, or we can all protest against things, and we can all do that over the internet, but what we're doing is we're squatting corporate space, right? And this is something that, that Amazon proved quite accidentally when they removed somebody's copy of 1984 from their Kindle reader because they had acquired it illegally. So you're walking around with an electronic device with a copy of a book on there, and somewhere in an office in California, somebody says, that guy walking around with that electronic device should not have that piece of work on his electronic device, and remotely removes it from
But that's like there's this square in Barcelona, the Orwell Square. They have these signs everywhere for where there's cameras. So there's this sign with, we have cameras here, Orwell Square. That's the same thing.
Okay, I didn't know about that. This wasn't even that long ago. I was coming home from France, and we stopped at one of these, these things, actually in Holland. We were already in Holland, but like on the side of the highway where you can rest. And there was a security camera there, and under it was a sign, this space is protected by the Big Brother Security Corporation. And I thought, there's a security corporation called Big Brother, and there is in Holland. So it was not enough, the Big Brother house, to destroy the fundamentals of what Big Brother is. There's now, I mean, how cynical can you be?
No, I think it was before the show.
That corporation?
Yeah.
Was there, I thought
I think it's been around for...
This was only a couple of years ago that I saw this for the first time. So maybe it's been around for a while and I just had never seen it, but I thought it was new. So
I think it's like 20 years old.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes it even worse. That nobody ever thought, like, this is just insane. But I mean, this is the thing, this is about the power relationships that I wanted to talk about. The power relationships of this device, which I am totally going to embarrass myself and show the Apple logo. This is the primary reason why I refuse to buy new Apple equipment, because of the way this device treats me as a human being.
Legally, you're renting that from Apple.
Yes,
it's not your
it's
money,
not mine.
technically
It's
not
not mine.
yours.
I know. And Apple, and you know what? Oh shit, what's his name now? The other teacher at HKU that does Jeroen van Peterson. We used to both have Palm Pilots, and we used to compare them. And, yeah, that's a lot of fun, eh? And mine broke, so I bought an iPod. Right? This was, I think, before. Yeah, this would have been before the iPhone already. And I was showing them the iPod, and they said, yeah, it's a really cool thing, eh? And he said to me, you know, Apple can remove files from that thing remotely. That's why he, for the longest time, refused to buy it. It dawned on me, I thought, whoa.
Sort of suggest that maybe we take a short break,
sure,
get some air, and then continue.